Welcome to WOLFKING WALK. Every street has a story, every place has a memory, and every journey begins with a single step. Today, we leave the ordinary behind and step into a new story, discovering the streets, culture, history, and everyday life of this remarkable place. So, take a breath, slow down, and walk with us. WOLFKING WALK. Discover every story. Songxi Ancient Village. A journey through time. Deep in the mountains of Zhejiang Province, in Pujiang County of Jinhua City, lies a village where history seems to breathe through every stone, every wooden doorway, and every quiet stream. This is Songxi Ancient Village, known in Chinese as Songxi Gu Tun. At first glance, Songxi may appear to be a peaceful traditional Chinese village, but behind its quiet streets lies a remarkable cultural heritage that stretches back thousands of years. Today, on Culture Route, we will walk through its ancient streets and discover the history, architecture, traditions, and atmosphere that have survived through generations. A village with thousands of years of history. Songxi Ancient Village is located in the northeastern part of Pujiang County and is recognized as an important historic and cultural village in Zhejiang. Although the settlement has a history stretching back thousands of years, much of the architecture visible today reflects the Ming and Qing dynasties. The Ming dynasty lasted from 1368 to 1644, followed by the Qing dynasty from 1644 to 1911. More than 1,560 historic structures are recorded within the village, including traditional residences, ancestral halls, temples, bridges, wells, and historic performance spaces. Together, these buildings transform Songxi into something much more than an old village. It becomes a living museum of traditional Chinese architecture. The stream that gave the village its name. Water has always played an important role in the identity of Songxi. The village takes its name from the Songxi stream, which flows through the settlement. 2 waterways pass through the village, and many traditional buildings were constructed beside or around these waterways. As you walk through Songxi, the sound of flowing water blends with the texture of stone pathways and the quiet atmosphere of the ancient houses. Here, water is not simply part of the landscape. It is part of the village's history and way of life. Traces of the Ming and Qing dynasties. One of Songxi's most remarkable features is the preservation of its traditional architecture. Dark tiled roofs, white and gray walls, wooden doors, stone-paved lanes, quiet courtyards, ancestral halls, ancient bridges. Each element tells a small part of the story of traditional rural China. As we walk through these narrow streets, we are not simply looking at old buildings. We are walking through the architectural heritage of the Ming and Qing eras. Where mountains, water, and architecture meet. Songxi's beauty does not come only from its historic buildings. The village exists within a landscape of mountains, streams, trees, and traditional homes. Here, architecture and nature appear to have grown together. The houses, waterways, courtyards, bridges, and paths form one connected environment. Perhaps this is what makes Songxi so captivating. History here is not confined to monuments. It is part of everyday life. The sound of water, the shade of old trees, the worn surface of a stone path, the wooden doors of centuries-old homes, all of them quietly preserve memories of the generations that came before. From the past to the present, like many historic villages across China, Songxi has experienced the changes brought by modernization, yet a significant part of its traditional architectural heritage has survived. Today, efforts are being made to preserve historic buildings while improving infrastructure, tourism, accommodation, and the local economy. The goal is not simply to preserve the past behind glass. It is to allow the past to remain part of the future, to protect history while allowing the village to continue living. A village shaped by centuries, Songxi is officially recognized as a National Historical and Cultural Village of China, and official Zhejiang sources describe it as a settlement with a history stretching back thousands of years. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Songxi is not simply how old it is how much of its traditional character has survived. More than 1,560 historic buildings from the Ming and Qing dynasties have been preserved here. These include traditional residences, ancestral halls, temples, bridges, ancient wells, and historic theater buildings. Imagine walking through these streets centuries ago. There were no modern roads, no bright advertisements, no traffic. Only the sound of footsteps on stone, the voices of families behind wooden doors, the movement of water beneath bridges, and the occasional sound of a village gathering. Today, the streets are quieter, but the architecture still carries the memory of those generations. The Songxi Stream. The village takes its name from the Songxi Stream, which flows through the settlement. Two streams associated with the Songxi River pass through the village, and some traditional houses were constructed over or beside bridges. As we walk beside the water, the atmosphere changes. The sound of the stream becomes part of the soundtrack. Water moves gently beneath an old bridge. Leaves sway above the narrow lanes. Ancient walls cast shadows across the stone pavement. And for a moment, the distinction between landscape and architecture disappears. The village seems to have grown naturally from the water. Stone, wood, water, and mountains become one continuous landscape. The architecture of Ming and Qing China. Look closely at the buildings around us. Dark gray roof tiles, whitewashed walls, wooden doors, carved details, deep courtyards, stone foundations, narrow passages connecting one building to another. Much of what we see today reflects the architectural traditions of the Ming Dynasty from 1368 to 1644, and the Qing Dynasty from 1644 to 1911. These buildings were not originally designed as tourist attractions. They were homes. Places where families were born, worked, celebrated festivals, raised children, and remembered their ancestors. That is why walking through Songxi feels different from walking through a reconstructed historical theme park. The architecture was created for life, and in many places, life continues around it. The texture of time. Look down at the stone beneath our feet. Centuries of footsteps have slowly worn the surfaces smooth. Rain has darkened the stone. Moss has found its way into the cracks. Walls have changed color under the influence of sunlight, humidity, and time. A doorway may look simple today, but imagine how many people have passed through it. Parents carrying children, merchants carrying goods, students carrying books, elders returning home, generations of villagers moving through the same spaces. This is what makes an ancient village powerful, not simply the age of the buildings, but the human stories accumulated inside them. A village of culture and poetry. Songxi's cultural heritage is not limited to architecture. The village has also developed a strong literary tradition. Historical accounts from Zhejiang describe the establishment of the Songxi Poetry Society during the Kangxi era of the Qing dynasty. The tradition of poetry and calligraphy continued through later generations, becoming an important part of the village's cultural identity. Imagine a quiet evening in the village. The sun disappears behind the mountains. The temperature begins to fall. A small group gathers together. Ink is placed on paper. A brush moves slowly across the page, and words emerge from the silence. In a village surrounded by mountains and water, poetry became another way of preserving memory. The landscape inspired the words, and the words, in turn, preserved the landscape. The living culture of Songxi. Even today, Songxi is associated with traditional cultural practices and local craftsmanship. Recent cultural exchange visits have highlighted traditional activities such as rope making, weaving, and paper cutting, showing that the village's heritage is not limited to its old buildings. This is an important distinction. A historic village can become an empty collection of buildings, but a living village continues to have people, traditions, and everyday activities. When a craft is practiced, when a traditional festival is celebrated, when an old house remains part of someone's daily life, the heritage becomes something more than architecture. It becomes living culture. Mountains embracing the village. Step outside the narrow lanes and look toward the surrounding landscape. Mountains rise around Songxi. Green vegetation covers the slopes. Water moves through the settlement. The village sits quietly between these natural elements. This relationship between architecture and landscape is one of the defining characteristics of traditional settlements in this part of Zhejiang. The village was not simply placed on the landscape. It was shaped by it. The waterways influenced where houses were built. The mountains created a natural backdrop. The paths followed the contours of the settlement, and the buildings formed a human-scale environment designed around community life. Is Songxi a UNESCO World Heritage Site? There is an important point to clarify. Songxi Ancient Village itself is not currently inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List. It is instead recognized in China as a national historical and cultural village. an important national-level designation for historic settlements. UNESCO's World Heritage List does include other important cultural sites in China. One example relevant to our wider journey is Quanzhou, Emporium of the World in Songyuan, China, which was inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 2021. Quanzhou's UNESCO property represents the city's extraordinary role as a maritime trading center between the 10th and 14th centuries during the Song and Yuan periods. Its heritage includes religious buildings, ancient bridges, pagodas, docks, production sites, and other remains connected with the maritime trading network. But Songxi and Quanzhou should not be confused. Songxi is in Zhejiang province. Quanzhou is in Fujian province. They are different places with different heritage designations, yet both tell us something important about China's extraordinary cultural landscape. History is not concentrated in one city or one monument. It exists across villages, rivers, mountains, ports, and ancient roads. Songxi Ancient Village, where stone streets meet living water. Deep in the green landscapes of Zhejiang province, surrounded by mountains, forests, and flowing streams, there is a place where the rhythm of modern life seems to fade away. A place where ancient stone streets disappear between traditional houses, where narrow waterways quietly pass beneath old bridges, where birdsong rises from the trees, and where the sound of flowing water becomes the natural soundtrack of village life. This is Songxi Ancient Village. Here, we are not simply visiting an old settlement. We are walking through a landscape shaped by centuries of human life, nature, and memory. As we enter the village, the atmosphere begins to change. The road becomes narrower. The sounds of traffic slowly disappear. Ahead of us, an old stone pathway leads between traditional houses. The surface of the stones is uneven and naturally worn, shaped by countless footsteps and decades of rain. Some stones are darkened by moisture. Others are covered with tiny traces of moss. Between the old walls, small plants have found their way through the cracks. It feels as though nature has slowly begun to reclaim every corner. And yet, the village remains alive. A door opens. Someone speaks from inside an old house. And somewhere above us, birds move between the branches. Walking on ancient stone streets. Every step along these streets feels different. The stones beneath our feet are not perfectly smooth. They carry the marks of time. Rainwater flows gently along the edges of the pathway, following channels that have guided water through the village for generations. When the sunlight touches the wet stones, they begin to shine. After rainfall, the entire street seems to transform. The gray stone becomes darker. The old walls become deeper in color. The leaves become brighter, and the reflections of the surrounding houses appear softly in the water. For a moment, the village feels almost like a painting. The quiet waterways of Songxi. One of the most beautiful elements of Songxi is its relationship with water. Small waterways move through the village, connecting streets, houses, and bridges. The water flows quietly beneath old stone crossings. Sometimes it is almost completely still. Sometimes small ripples move across its surface as the wind passes. Look closely and you may see leaves floating gently downstream. The sound is subtle, not loud, not dramatic, just the constant, peaceful sound of water moving through an ancient settlement. And perhaps that is why Songxi feels so calm. The village is always moving, but never in a hurry. The sound of birds. Before seeing them, you may hear them. A bird calling from somewhere deep within the trees. Another answering from the opposite side of the village. The sound travels softly between the old buildings. Above the rooftops, branches move gently in the wind. Birds fly from one tree to another. The village seems to breathe with the surrounding forest. There are no artificial sounds competing with nature. Just birds, water, wind. History hidden in the details. Songxi is recognized as a national historical and cultural village in China, and its traditional architecture includes many structures dating from the Ming and Qing periods. But the history of Songxi is not only found in large monuments, it is hidden in small details. A carved wooden doorway, an old stone bridge, a weathered wall, a traditional roof, a narrow passage between houses, a stone beside the water worn smooth by time. When we slow down and look carefully, every detail becomes part of the story. A slow journey through time. Walking through Songxi is not about reaching a destination quickly. There is nowhere to hurry. One street leads to another. One bridge leads to another. The sound of water follows us. The forest remains visible between the rooftops. And every few steps, something different catches the eye. A small courtyard, an old wooden window, a bird resting on a branch, flowers growing beside a wall, sunlight reflected in a narrow stream. This is why walking is perhaps the best way to experience a place like Songxi. You begin to notice things that you would miss from a car or a bus. The living heritage Songxi is not simply a collection of old buildings preserved from another era. It is a living environment. People still move through these streets. Deep in the green mountains of Zhejiang province, surrounded by forests, streams, and ancient stone pathways, lies a village where the rhythm of modern life seems to slow down. A place where narrow stone streets wind between centuries-old houses, where quiet waterways flow beneath old bridges, where birdsong rises from the surrounding trees, and where the sound of flowing water becomes the natural soundtrack of village life. This is Songxi Ancient Village. Here, we are not simply visiting an old Chinese village. We are walking through a living landscape shaped by history, nature, and generations of human life. Walking through the ancient stone streets. As we enter the village, the road gradually becomes narrower. On both sides, traditional gray walls and dark wooden doors rise quietly above us. The street is so narrow that the old houses seem almost close enough to touch. Beneath our feet are weathered stone slabs, their surfaces slowly polished by countless footsteps and centuries of rain. Some stones are darkened by moisture, others are covered with delicate traces of moss. Tiny plants grow between the cracks, slowly reclaiming spaces once shaped by human hands. As we walk deeper into the village, our footsteps echo between the old walls. Our journey ends here, but the story continues. Every street we walk, every place we discover, and every culture we experience becomes part of a greater journey around the world. Thank you for walking with us. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and follow WOLFKING WALK for more adventures around the world. Turn on notifications and join us on our next journey. Until the next adventure, keep exploring, keep discovering, and never stop walking. WOLFKING WALK. Discover every story.